Kyla Ross. I'm the project manager for the Center for Creative Business Innovation and Hamburg Galleries, and I'm very excited to welcome our panelists to join us today. So far, we have with us Mason Victoria and Marisol D'Andrea, and we're waiting on Karen Darricades, who is having a little bit of technical difficulties, but she should be with us shortly. So I'm going to go ahead and begin by just giving you a little bit of information about our two panelists that are so far with us today for this conversation. And I'll begin with Marisol. Marisol D'Andrea is an academic consultant, multidisciplinary researcher, visual artist, actor, and the author of The Power of Artistic Thinking, Think Like an Artist and Innovate. She has published over a dozen academic journal articles on the topics of art leadership and creative economy. And in 2021, Marisol was awarded the Strategic National Arts Alumni Project. Congratulations to that accomplishment, Marisol. And thank you for joining us. Also with us today is Mason. Mason Victoria is an award-winning multi-instrumentalist and composer. He's the head of education and outreach at Spectrum Music, where he's produced concerts with predominant artists in the music industry. Mason has also performed his work all over the world and has received various accolades for it. Welcome, Mason. And just before Karen hopefully is able to join us, but Karen Darricades is an artist, educator, writer, community activist, and award-winning youth worker living in Toronto. She's the host of We Make Media podcast and the head of arts and culture at Creative Commons Canada. Karen's artworks have been exhibited through many art galleries and exhibitions, and we're really excited to have her join us shortly in the panel. I'm sure that she'll be able to resolve her technical issues in a few moments. So welcome to both of you. Is there anything that you want to add to those statements before we move into the first question?
I'm good, but thank you for inviting us. And I'm happy to answer any questions at the end of the presentation.
Yes, great. Okay, so we have a few questions that we've prepared for you guys on this panel. And then, yes, as Marisol mentioned, we'll be able to take questions from the audience as well. It's going to be very conversational, this panel. And we want to get started with talking about the role of the artist, the name of the title of this panel discussion, and how we can best frame the role of the artist in order to combat precarity and properly place value on their work. And I think that Marisol, you've done a lot of work in this area and a lot of writing, and you even maybe have prepared a slide that we can share. Yes. So just let us know when you want that to come up. And
sure, it can come up now. Yes, thank you. Thank you for your question. Very interesting topic. I have researched. I'm a researcher by heart. I'm a visual artist. I'm passionate about the arts and artist careers. So I have done a lot of work on this topic. And what is the role of the artist? What is the role? It depends, right? But since we're talking about a creative economy today, I would like to frame the role of the artist under the umbrella of the creative economy. So first of all, some of you might know this concept, but what is in fact the creative economy? With the competition that we have nowadays, the globalized world and the demands to compete for ideas, for jobs, ideas have acquired an economic value. So these ideas are rewarded. New ideas are always rewarded. So that's how the creative economy was born. So in terms of creativity is now the new economic engine. So the more creative and the more ideas you have, good ideas, the better you will be in terms of being an artist. So years ago, I prepared this a paper on the role of the artist. And I created this model that you see before you. And I call it commercial because as an artist, I know where we have the passion to do it, but we need to make a living. And under the creative economy, we are forced to make a living on the arts. So I created this model to think about what the role of the artist is under the umbrella of the creative economy, where ideas are commoditized. So they need to be commercial in order to sustain your craft. So I start with thinking about creative. So commercial, I spell it out as it stands for first creative. So the ability to generate new ideas, something new. Then the artist's role is also an observer. The artist as an ethnographer, that is to witness the dynamics of the world in an effort to understand and describe the world. Money raiser, those who speak the language of grants, of writing good proposals, will be able to sustain their career, especially in particular here in Toronto. Then we have M for marketer. Creating a brand is important. In fact, if you look around you, all the products that we see is the result of a good marketing. Entrepreneur, again, living off of your work requires you to have this business acumen, and you need to build those concepts and incorporate it into your daily routine. Then I'll go with the reason. The reason comes in terms of asking yourself, why do you create art? And is the art that you have sellable? Or is the art that you're creating just for you? So those are the questions. You need to have a reason for it, for the creation of art. Then I have connections. Connecting is important. Connecting, networking, building those weak ties. I can explain later what the weak ties are, but it basically is networking with gallery owners, with curators, with other artists, understand the community and understanding how the ecosystem of the arts works, especially in Toronto, which is different than the US, I believe. Then we have ideas. John Hawkins once said that people with ideas have become more powerful than people who work with machines. So new ideas, good ideas, generate a lot of impact. And we know that for so many, we have so many examples of that around us. Authenticity is the next one. And in the arts, authenticity is always rewarded. So once you authenticate your work, you are considered a professional established artist. You may ask, how do I authenticate my work? Well, you need to sell it. Under the creative economy, you need to make money. And the last one, the passion, the label of love. That's why we all artists create, for love. And but also you have to ask yourself, am I happy creating art? So because it takes a lot of you to create it, but under the under the creative economy, you have to be able to sell it, to sell that love. And that's what I have for question 1. And if you want to learn more, you can read the whole paper. I provided the title there in there.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Marisol. I would love to read your paper, and I think this acronym that you've created is so wonderful and very accurate. I mean, I can speak to my own experience as an artist for sure, that I have many times felt sort of the pressure of all of these various roles that are represented in this acronym here, and all of the different skill sets that an artist really needs to have in order to be effective at their craft. Welcome, Karen. I just wanted to welcome you to our group. Thank you so much. I know that you were having some technical issues, and don't worry, you're not the only one today to have that. So, but I'm glad you're able to join us. Yes, and I did already read your bio and introduce you in absentia, so we're glad you're with us now. But we're still on this first question of framing the role of the artist in order to combat precarity and properly place value on their work. And so Marisol just went through that wonderful acronym and going over all of those different skill sets. Is there anything that you would like to add to that in addressing that question?
I haven't answered the question, but since I didn't get a chance to hear Marisol, maybe Mason has something to say in direct response.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and we could pull back up that slide because it's a really incredible way to kind of break it down, because it's definitely what it is. Artists are entrepreneurs ultimately, and there's so much time and effort that we spend being artists, becoming the best that we can be and delivering the art that we want to do, that we don't really spend a lot of time really subjecting ourselves to the ability to selling it and marketing it and providing it to either in a public or a commercial kind of environment. And I remember going through, as someone that has gone through jazz school, who was a lot about my performance and my ability in art, it was definitely, interesting kind of being in this environment of everyone just trying to get gig after gig, but not able to kind of sustain themselves in that economy and what had to be done. And for me particularly, I went into kind of the music program as someone that was self-taught. I didn't know much about how to, I didn't study music the same way that many people did at the time. So I decided to kind of network instead and create a band to make, have others play my music. And that kind of led me into this entrepreneurship role where I started marketing myself as someone that could create music, could have people perform it, and I could provide them with gig performances and things like that. And that kind of evolved into the things that I started to do in education and the things that I'm doing now. I'm particularly working in game audio and making sound design and music for video games. But in that particular realm, it's a whole another level, because instead of just working with artists among yourselves, you're not only working with particularly asset related artists or people that are crafts related, you're working with programmers, you're working with kind of managers and people in these kind of roles that don't necessarily what you do as an artist. So how could you sell it to people without actually being able to use the terms that you've learned through all of the things that you've done? And it's such an interesting thing, kind of being in that scenario where someone asks you what you do and you have to be able to stand out, as well as just be able to kind of weave in the through line of your story and the things that you do and how it makes you different from the others in that sense. And I think this whole kind of commercial outline is just exactly what it is. The Creative, the Observer, and Money Raiser. The grant thing was definitely something that was huge for me, and kind of how important it was to kind of learn how to create a grant, learn and be able to teach others how to market themselves in a way that they could receive grants for the things that they want to do. And at the end of the day, that labor of love was something that was really interesting to me as well, because I did that large ensemble thing and we received awards for the big band that we ran and the ensemble. But there was an issue for me in the sense that I felt like I wasn't providing the monetary value that the artists that I was working with, that they deserved. Working as a large ensemble ran on grants. So a large ensemble being a 21-piece orchestra, I felt that the artists that I worked with deserved more. And so because of that, I wanted to kind of change the things that I did to provide opportunity, and as well as kind of go down a different stream of creativity in that sense. But I think really seeing it from an entrepreneurial lens and being able to think to yourself, okay, outside of just being an artist, is this what I want to do? And am I proud of what I'm doing? Is it where I want to be? And do I see a trajectory in the things that I want to do? I think it's the best way to find that value and also enjoy what you do at the same time. But that's what I'll add. Great. I love this slide, Marisol. Great to see it.
Thank you. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Me too. Karen?
Thank you.
I mean, there's so much there. I think that, like, I am also 100%, an entrepreneur. And I think that those who think that way certainly have a leg up. And I think that there's a fair resentment of that necessity as well, right? From certain artists and artist communities, in the sense that you have to, why can't the artist and the artist contribution to society be enough in itself, right? Like, why do we have to be the website builder, the grant writer, the tax doer, you know what I mean? Like, is there not, people always talk about, I mean, I work, my bread and butter is in education and in community engaged work. And, it is art as a tool, but I have this, there's this tension with that term, because I am using art as a tool for exploring cultural narratives and a number of things in media literacy. But also, no one ever says history is a great tool to teach science, or we never kind of equivocate around this. And what struck me the most about your question about how do we frame the role of the artist, I guess there's a lot to unpack in this idea of the we, right? Like, who is the we? And the fact that that some of us might have the resilience, the skills, the multidisciplinary like ability to create work, sell our work, like sell it in terms of ideas and goals and objectives to a grant, but also like sell it in terms of like monetary value or whatever, is a lot. Like there's a lot as society to put on creatives, right? Like especially since like we create systems that hopefully those systems would support them in those aspects, and that again, economies and groups or whether it's the film or television or music, as you spoke of, where it's not one individual in a room who's making the work with some supplies. It makes sense that there would be some team norms and some kind of like group situations that would develop there. But I think when I think about this, like how do we whose responsibility is it to reframe the narrative? And this we is like, there's society, there's artists, there's audiences, and not all of us have the equal amount of power and control over the narrative surrounding the importance of the artist, right? And sadly, very sadly, so tragically for us all, there is this kind of schism. There's this like massive cognitive dissonance between people's attitudes towards arts and culture and people's actual relationship with arts and culture, right? So when we talk about the respect and reverence for the artists and their actual labor, or when we talk about funding towards the arts, right? Or we talk, and this is not just outside of the art sector, like looking from the outside in. This is within the art sector as well. We internalize some of these attitudes of like, well, I love what I do, so it makes sense that I wouldn't get paid well, right? All these capitalist narratives, or like this isn't important, right? Like this isn't as important as being a doctor or being it, right? Like, so yet what do people spend most of their paychecks on? What do people talk about most of the time, right? Streaming, music, right? Like art, look at this print I bought, look at this cool mural, like, but then when we talk about funding to the arts or giving respect to the arts or giving artists the labor rights, right? Like we don't say to a staff person, to a person who works in an organization, like they should, be doing their own taxes and writing the grants for the organization to get the funding. And you know what I mean? They're able to do their thing, right? The thing that they contribute. And so it's not an answer, but it's, like it's just an expanding of the question of just, how do we make it more transparent, the contributions of artists in individual projects and in larger platforms and systems, right? Audiences want the artists to get paid, right? They're like, I'm paying Spotify, that must mean musicians are getting paid. But we know that like even Taylor Swift, like even the cream of the crop, right? Like she's always attacking, she's speaking truth to power in terms of like how that is not the case, right? So how can we make it more transparent, the actual contributions of artists, and less opaque by these platforms or museum systems or whatever it is, intermediaries, so that artists can and change the cultural narrative so that we can actually value the work that artists do, as opposed to having to fit artists into this world of, this capitalist world of like churning out work and selling the work and writing about the work and like paying everybody else but yourself, right? With Mason was talking, right? So great. We don't exploit others, we exploit ourselves. It's like,
I think in some ways being an artist and trying to produce work and monetize it can feel like trying to force a round peg of the art into the square hole of capitalism, and they just don't always fit. And the artists who are very successful at that and are doing a great job at monetizing their work, now they can get labeled as like some kind of sellout, or like they're now diminishing the authenticity of their work because they are fitting so well into that square hole peg of capitalism and being very financially successful at it. And you hear of like sellouts as artists all the time, and it sometimes feels like you just can't win. I would say that in a sense, I think the pandemic kind of shed a little bit of light on this aspect and of artists and the amount of real value that everyone really takes from artists all the time, when everybody was now stuck at home and had no choice but to entertain themselves by consuming the work of artists. And then also with things like in Canada, at least the CERB, it's really an example of how artists can thrive and benefit from receiving a basic income and not having to go out and really hustle to be able to just create the work that is in response to their lived experience in the society that we're all existing in, right? Is there anything else anybody else wants to add to that? Yeah, go ahead, Mason.
I did want to add, speaking to what Karen said too about, know your worth and the exploitation of things. I think one really important thing about framing the role of an artist is that, again, the artist is the one that really frames themselves, in the sense that, and it seems counterintuitive, but you should say no to gigs that you think are not your worth. And I think having that precedence that all artists kind of are willing to say no to the things that are either feeling exploitative of their art or very underpaid for what they're putting in the effort and time to do, and being able to, fight that urge of saying, but it's a cool project and I could do a really cool thing at like chump change. I think the more artists kind of promote themselves to be professionals that have to be paid at a professional rate, that it would result in all of us kind of reframing what artists are worth in that sense. And it's a really hard thing, because I at the beginning, you're always just trying to get you're trying to balance networking versus exploitation, and, working with others for free and getting something out of it, and really kind of analyzing the situation case by case. But I think understanding and learning as an early artist to say no to gigs to lead you to gigs that will pay you what you are rightfully owed is a way to really start to push yourself as a professional and an entrepreneur in that industry as an artist. Yeah.
Can I add to that? Well, yes, but that expression that you always have to say yes, because that's a way, if you want to start I believe as an artist, as you are new in the business, you need to expose yourself and present your work. And that would take, no matter what you do in what career, except, let's say, even medical doctors, they have to do internships in hospitals and work 24/7. So everybody have to put the time to build their career. So in the beginning, you might have to do 3 things just to expose yourself, just to network. And you cannot say no too much. You are not at that level of saying, you're not a professional artist. You are not, I believe, in a level of saying no to projects or no to things. You can always work together, find your community and work on it. You don't have to give out your work for free, but you can present it, you can work together. You can, for example, arrange an exhibition, right? Maybe split the costs, because it's an investment eventually, right? So that's, I believe, that's why it's important to have the passion and to love what you do. Because if you are there for the money, no matter what you do, and it's not just in the arts, it won't work out, right? But I believe in the arts it's more difficult, because we need to build the culture, and it starts from the government. Because whenever there is, we are in recession now, they say, who cares about the arts? We care more about housing. I tried to get into politics. The arts was not in the agenda. It was all about housing, food, poverty, homeless, all other topics that will get politicians' votes, right? But the arts wasn't there. So that's something I think that as a whole community we need to work on. And I personally believe that it starts with us teaching the next generation of artists, of children, to appreciate the arts, that it's okay to be an artist, and help them, give them the way of how things work, and speak for the arts. Because from Sir Ken Robinson, he believed, the late Ken Robinson, he believed that the arts are taught as children in the schools, but then they're taken away from you, right? And then when we become adults and we want to be an artist, but we are confused because we have to do other things. So we don't keep that with us. So that's something I think as a society we need to work on. And it's not much about the economy. I mean, if we don't have the arts, we wouldn't have anything. Just look around you. All the architecture, all, even a garden, everything requires arts. So that's something I think that we can try to speak up, and as an artist and in the community, with our families, and whoever has the power to go to government officials, explain that to them, because most of them don't understand it. And as I said, they just want a vote, right? And they won't. Unfortunately, the arts are always in the bottom of the agenda. So advocacy efforts are the way to go.
Yeah, sorry.
I could keep going.
I mean, well, I think it's a good potential lead, and I have a lot of things to say about what you said, but I don't know if we have the time for it. So, but I do think that the part that you were talking about at the end is maybe a good lead into the second question, in terms of obviously these are massively big things talking about, right? I do think it's a dangerous contradiction to say that we're entrepreneurs, but then we should do it for free because we love what we do. I just want to say that, because you would never learn that in a business school, right? In business school, you are your HR, right? Like, you are the most important human resource. So to stretch it by saying yes to everything just because you're at the beginning. And the problem is that I can tell you hundreds of anecdotal stories of people who are Canadian famous and being on their 4th film set and still being sold the narrative that they should get a stipend instead of a proper salary.
Right.
Because they're building their name when they've already won awards at TIFF, right? So I mean, the problem with those narratives is that they scale, right? And then you're still at the top and you're established. Like, it's one thing when you're emerging and you're like, yeah, I'll do this for free. And it's an amazing thing that artists understand that there's a lot more value in exchanges and in collaboration than just monetary, right?
I'm talking about emerging artists. The emerging artists. It's like, when you open a business, you send free samples, right? They do a lot of marketing. There is a lot of investment put in. I believe a business doesn't build overnight. You still have to put investment and time and effort in it. Right?
Yeah, but the problem is when you get to a certain point, and
because
you're like,
I know what you mean.
Putting it in for free, then what?
No, I'm just saying, But when you start, somebody have to know you, and you cannot say no all the time, right? And I know artists. I have interviewed hundreds of artists for my research. And I know that some of them do different kinds of works, one for sale and one for their own passion, their own soul. So it's how you navigate the system as well, right? And
right. But I'm just saying, if the IP and your creative output, like what you're producing, is your IP, is the stuff that you're building as a business, right? Like, is your monetizable, whatever, then you should also cherish saying no to make space for creating that investment, right? Like, if you're investing in ideas, right, then you can't be working for everyone else and saying yes.
No, there's of course a line.
And I think it's I agree with you. Like, I would rather change society, and I'm in the light, I'm in the job of encouraging young people all the time to be artists, even though there are many people, again, in program or cultural program, of the people in the arts who are telling marginalized young people, don't be an artist, right? Choose something more secure, right? I know successful artists who say, God, I hope my children don't go into the arts, right? Because it's tough, right? So we have to, we have to do something really, which is about the austerity measures that have cut the funds. But to switch it to something positive, to say that, I do think the stock is going up on what we do, right? And that as technology, right, will continue to do what it does, which is transform society, and right now particularly, transform industry and workflow and workforces, that we will still be creating, and that our human capacity for multidisciplinary and divergent thinking, compassion, humor, play, like, will be valuable, like, beyond belief, both financially and in all other ways, socially. Or at least that is my hope. And I did read an article in Forbes where the person was saying that content is a better investment than real estate. I had to kind of roll my eyes, but / go like, I hope so. In terms of the future economy, because when we're no longer doing things and our labor is not necessarily, and we're liberated from the day job necessarily funding the thing. But again, can we do that when it's platforms of people churning out, people are burnt out churning out content and videos and stories. Oh, Instagram just changed the way that they do their thing. And grantors 2 years ago wouldn't even consider online things. And now they want to know how many followers you have. So it's like, what? Like, this is crazy. So now this is another thing. I got to do the website, and I got to build the followers, and I got to whatever, just to get at the government money, there's and
even the most successful artists, like in the music industry, they are even very successful artists. You mentioned Taylor Swift earlier, like very like artists who are selling, platinum albums, and they are required by their labels to have a TikTok channel and create content. And sometimes they'll even like tongue in cheek create a video that's like, this is my obligatory content video that my label is requiring me to make. So here it is. And that's the actual content that they're creating, right? Social media has taught us that attention is monetizable, monetary, and it is unlimited. People's attention, there's no limit to it, right? Yeah. You can close a store and you can only shop at that store during the open and closing hours, but your attention is unlimited. I can access it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And the tech industry has really capitalized on that big time. And now we're all a part of it. And there's really there's at this point, I don't know if there's any escaping it at this point. But that does lead us into the next question, which is, what does creativity in art do for the publics? I'm going to pluralize that, and the economy. And I think it also connects sort of to that idea of, what is driving our economy, and is it really a tangible force anymore? And how is our creativity contributing to community, publics, and the economy, and in what way? Anybody have anything to add to that? Or
I could jump in first. So I'm in this very interesting spot in my career where I'm being pulled in so many different directions and doing a whole bunch of different things. And what I've learned from all the places that I've been in kind of like creative realms is that, innovation is what leads to, the growth of economy and things like that. But the thing that is really hard is that we can't always put economic value on art all the time. And like you said, Kyla, it isn't always something that is tangible. It is something that is kind of in the air that allows people to realize that they could push innovation further and do different things. And the example that I've kind of fallen into working in games as of recent is how big augmented reality and virtual reality kind of expanded outside of this realm of, and how interactive art and media has become more and more incorporated into what is now packaged as marketing for things or events or ways to draw people in. Before, games were a kid's toy, and it was this idea that it'll keep Mason distracted so he doesn't bother me while I'm making dinner or something like that. But what it's becoming now is it's becoming a community. It's becoming there's a whole big conversation about where games is leading to in terms of community building and the terms that are kind of related to it that I won't get into. But I think the interesting thing that has stemmed out of that is how it's led to technical innovations of, virtual reality, simulations of doing surgeries, or augmented reality educational tools that dive into all of these things that would otherwise not have existed. And if prior to the technical age, if someone came up to you and said like, hey, I have this idea that like this screen is going to like create like a fake world as you point onto your real world and create some interesting stuff that will make you think that they're both there and it'll teach you something, someone would probably be like, what the hell are you talking about? Like that's the year 3000, hover car situation that we don't know for. But the fact that we are here right now and there is incredible. And there's so much talk about, monopolies and duopolies and how we're trying to break them down in order to allow us to innovate and be creative again, in the sense of, how we could kind of push through what we know and use creativity to create a new, do what we did before with this idea of, we didn't know technology was going to be this great until we broke down the walls of, what a cell phone could be or what networks can be or what things can be in that sense. And I think another thing in that sense as well is on the other side of things is that there's so many concepts and ideas that we can't always describe through words or in my case in games, in code, to have someone be able to visualize it and be crazy enough to try to create it and show it to someone, pushes that concept and idea of trying to go beyond what we thought was imaginable and possible. And I think, that's just the biggest thing. Innovation is the thing that really drives creativity and what it does for our public and our economy.
But, how do we stop the Zuckerbergs from being the only person that gains from that, I guess, is the question. I work in AR and like, I mean, it's an incredibly exciting time, but there are still the majority of people who are like, what are you talking about? Even then when you show it to them or, but I think, there was like a call, like a Facebook thing, like maybe a year or something ago, and I was doing like filters with their Spark AR and stuff, and with their software, and it was like, do a face filter like for winter, like for Christmas or whatever, and they were giving away 10 prizes globally of $10,000 each, which is like beyond laughable in terms of like they know exactly what the equation is for exactly how many pennies every second you're in their app they earn, and again, I mean, and Mark Zuckerberg has been like the first to be like, like there's going to be a content explosion and it's just going to be a content creators world, which I mean we are seeing in streaming and stuff for film. There's a lot less of a star system, and it's a lot more like there's a lot more work for writers and directors and actors and stuff than there was before. But then they're getting rid of like residuals and so again, it's and then if we go back to like if you want to get into like decentralized and going back to a decentralized internet and all of that, they do to blockchain technology and all of these things, which I'm sure nobody wants to get into, but again, very few people know how to use these things. So you still have gatekeeper, you still have not the public accessible things. We have more control over it if you're HTMLing your own website, but I will always be a Squarespace and Wix kind of lady because I like to drop, and I'm already making the art, writing the grant, doing the taxes, right? So we have this difficulty of convenience, and then the audience just being used to paying nothing, right? Like that's another system that makes it opaque, like the actual labor structures, which is why we need practical thing. Like there was a digital economies lab that was funded by that happened out of a gallery in Ottawa that brought a bunch of amazing creative technologists and people together through the Digital Strategies Fund at from the Canada Council of the Arts, and one of the things they came up with was artist guilds and like ways of like protecting like the funding of the labor structures, so that artists are getting I'm still waiting for the delivery of the promise of the global economies and the internet, where like, the kind of Kickstarter, Patreon model, where like I don't need people to spend. I don't need to find one agent and one gallery to spend $100,000 on my work, right? I need to have a way for the 10,000 of 100,000 audience of an entire global audience to put 1 penny in my account without noticing it, right? That's what we've been trying and talking, whatever, but we're still getting into situations where we're putting stuff into the stream and, Meta's getting money and, people are getting things, but artists are still not seeing the value of their the financial.
If I could, yeah, exactly. If I could just add to that really quickly, because you mentioned that audiences are used to not paying anything, or the public wants to consume art without paying anything, but they are paying something. They're really paying with their attention, right? They're just not paying financially, but their attention they are giving that away for free.
And their data,
and their data and their attention, they're paying with their data and their attention. And who is end up profiting off of that at the end of the day are these big monopolies in the tech industry who are really getting the financial and capitalist benefit of that attention and of that data. So how can we ensure that filters back down to the artist so that the content can continue to be created? And maybe in some way that is a message to the artist that that needs to become a part of the content that you're creating, because it's going into the minds and being consumed by your viewer, one way or another. So maybe that needs to be inserted into the content, letting people know in a more meta kind of way that you are paying for this. You're just paying for it in not financial terms. So if you want to keep on consuming it, you need to be a part of this sort of message that artists need to get paid and fairly, right?
Yeah, and there's some great memes about that. There's some great, like that it took me, it cost this much because it took me effing hours or whatever, there's a lot of great memes about
the TikTok song.
And there's lots, I think there's an app now actually for influencers where they share, because again, there's another opaque system where people are being asked to do stuff by Nike, by Foot Locker, by whatever, and they're being asked to do it, can you design these Converse and we're going to pay you in Converse. People are like, do you think I'm an idiot? I don't understand how the economy works. I don't, why would I, it's one thing to do a mural for free for a project in a marginalized community. You know what I mean? If you don't understand equity, but you have millions, you need to pay. And the way that they're doing it is divide and conquer. People don't know what other influencers are getting paid, right? And so there's this new app, I can't remember what it's called, but people are sharing with each other.
We need more transparency, I think, in that way as well, using those platforms to be transparent about what you're getting and what you should be getting. Just in the interest of time, I'm going to move on to our third question now, which is I think also relevant to this conversation, which is why should it be a priority for these communities that we're serving, community, publics at large, and also a priority of governments and funders to support artists and give them the resources that they need to create change and help them succeed. Why should that be a priority? And I guess I'll also add not only why, but how. How can it be made a priority a little more strategically, I guess, if you have any thoughts on that?
If you look at the Toronto Arts Council website, they have really nice numbers there about the economy of the arts. And they have arts and culture contributes $11.3 billion annually to Toronto's GDP. That tells you, the arts are vibrant, they are making money. The question is how much of that goes to the artists, as you have discussed it, right? So there's a big argument there in terms of economics. In terms of the public eye, as it was mentioned before, innovation, I believe we need to, in order to grow and as a society and to advance, we need the arts. And we need to support it, the creativity of everyone, really. And that's why I wrote a book on innovation. So those are the two main things. It's economics and it's innovation for me.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think you mentioned at the beginning, right? I mean, basic
Right.
income guarantees. I think, what's so incredibly, we took away a lot, and this came with Ford, but but I mean, really, measures of austerity have been happening for 30 years, right? Like, it was not like this. There were different times. We don't know them, but there were different times. We took away a lot of the funding so a lot of the funding that exists now is only for like production, like to produce something and to exhibit it, right? So guaranteed whatever, the production part, the most capitalist part of the artistic process. But when I interviewed, I did an episode about deep fakes on my podcast with the lead of a think tank in the UK called Demos. That's about, they study like social media, democracy, and cybersecurity, and synthetic media. And he was saying, like, we need more artists, we need more philosophers, we need more researchers, we need more thinking, and we really need funding for the work around the work. I mean, my partner jokingly, like, I'll be sitting in my studio, like staring at the wall and tapping a pencil on my knee, and he'll walk in and be like, "Oh, I'm sorry, am I disturbing your work?" And it's a joke, but like, it's true. Like, that's where the magic happens, baby. Like, when I'm in the flow and I'm connecting these seemingly disconnected things, right? And having a larger picture, or a zoom in moment, or a zoom out moment, or whatever. Again, as the machines come for the rest of our jobs, that's uniquely human, right? And that's going to be particularly important. And we really need to fund the professional development, the research in the arts, the travel in the arts, the networking in the arts, right? Which is also speaks to the business part that everybody's been talking about, right? It's not just giving me money for 10 paintings, right? Because I have to do so much other work as a business, as an entrepreneur, around the work, right? And if I'm working for an organization, paid PD is involved, right? I'm going to get paid to go to the conference. It's at the conference that I'm going to meet the potential buyer, or find my customer, or find my collaborator, or find out about a new funder or a new type of funding. So we really need to fund the artists and the thinkers and the people that are asking big, useless questions, that are, I mean, as Marshall McLuhan, Canadian media theorist, always said, artists are a distant early warning system, right? They tell you about where society is going. So we need to fund the staring at walls. Thinking, right? And the philosophy, we need more philosophers. We need more people thinking about, like, where are we going as a society, and like, should we go there, right? The tech is going super fast, right? The digital environments are changing constantly.
Just to build upon that, because it's definitely that artists need time to think and create. It's such a big thing. And, working through the Humber Galleries fellowships that we've been doing here at Humber has been really great to like spend so much time really ideating and figuring out ideas. But I think that adds to the idea, like, beyond just financial support, there should be emotional support. A lot of, like, we talked about how young students and people are kind of being pushed away from the arts because of its lack of financial stability and its worth and things like that. And I teach at the University of Toronto a game audio course that is relatively new, and students that go through that course say, like, I've never thought this would be a class, let alone something that I'd be interested in, let alone something that I really want to pursue this now, because it's an opportunity I didn't expect to have and didn't exist prior to this moment. And I think that ability to nurture these young artists to be able to pursue their goals and to give them the ability to attend educational events, or educational scenarios in which they could be exposed to new different types of crafts and arts within their field and the things that they think would interest them, could be a huge way to help kind of not only create change for them as an artist, but for the future generation of artists that are creating new innovative ideas in the future and the things that they're doing in that sense. But yeah, that's all I had.
Yeah, fellowship, the most beautiful word in the in the Grant English Dictionary.
Right. And I mean, I think if we're keeping this conversation quite future focused, I mean, I have a 7-year-old son and I talk all the time about how he is growing up using a lot of the technology. And I would like him to also grow up thinking about what purpose that technology serves in his life and how it can be best used in order to affect change on his community. Right. But at 7 years old, he already plays with a VR headset. Like, he already knows how to engage with that environment. And my 68-year-old father also just recently had his first experience using VR. So these different worlds are kind of colliding in front of my eyes at the same time. And also your comment, Karen, about, creation and that kind of like thought process being uniquely human, that creative thought process. It's never more obvious to me than when I see AI attempt to do it. Have you guys seen these like AI attempts to create, a style of music or write a short story by like they're consuming all this, stylistic information from the internet, and then you read it and you're like, this is nonsense. Like, it is, it's comical. If it's any kind of art form, it's definitely comedy. But I'm gonna move to see if there's any questions in the chat here. Okay, hold on. I'm gonna switch to the comment. Okay, let me see. I'm just scanning through them now.
Kobena kind of got you talking about AI and stuff.
Yes. Oh, yes. What about the AI invasion? Apps and avatars with interaction and VR bots playing instruments and artist combos never attainable in 3D. Exactly. Any thoughts about that?
So
that kind of
I could jump in specifically about bots playing instruments and stuff like that, or like specifically AI playing instruments. I produced a show called Coding Chaos, in which we use Google Magenta, which is like an AI data set that basically has a neural network that tries to make it perform like a musician. And so what we did was we got a jazz trio to play alongside this artificial intelligence that was playing music. And in our preliminary test, we realized that the AI had a few things. It didn't have feel. So like it didn't have an emotion when it played, and you could really sense it in the actual performance. And it didn't have space. It didn't know how to actually sense, when to kind of do these things that humans by nature, try to create as artists to kind of create importance of the scenario. Instead, AIs and the things that we were working with at the time, it was either a yes/no binary scenario of like, I am playing my notes or I'm not playing my notes. And because of that, in order to make it sound good, we had to change it so the musicians would serve the purpose of the robot to sound good, the AI. And it was such an interesting experience because the AI wouldn't do the same for us. The AI would not try to be like, okay, I could see that you are all trying something right now, and I'm just gonna like chill out for a bit. So we had to cater to the AI and work around its limitations as a sentient, like unsentient being. Like it literally forced our artists to really try to find the beauty of the AI and emote it and respond to it. We were really lucky to have Larnell Lewis in that and Bruce Cassidy. So really incredible performers, Chris Pruden. And what they would do is like this robot would play a sound or play a thing, and then they would take that sound and transform it into something more accessible to humans, it was just such a weird experience kind of seeing it, because everyone thought like, oh, this AI is gonna be super cool, it's gonna like destroy the jazz trio, but instead it was the jazz trio trying to like hype up the AI as opposed to the opposite. So I think in terms of art, in terms of music specifically, it just doesn't hit us emotionally the same way that a human would, and I'm not sure if it'll ever get to that point just because of that. Yeah, exactly. I know. I'm like, we'll see. Give it a year.
Yeah, longer than that. But yeah, I mean, the data set thing is, it's a whole other conversation, right? Because that's what they're using as their painted material, and unfortunately, that's too long of a conversation of how, of course, that's how so many biases, all the things that are wrong with society get amplified because those data sets the data sets that we have, the visual, auditory, and, you know, written textual like record of the human experience is not actually a mirror. You know, it's like a time capsule of very specific views and, you know, indexed in this very specific way. And then the AI is like, well, that's humanity. So here you go. Let me give it back to you. And you're like, oh God, that's terrifying. But yeah.
So we're almost out of time here, but I just wanted to draw a little bit of attention to Tuin's comment in the chat here, which was that we had met. There was a brief mention recently of history being a tool to teach science, for example, right? And he says it is a good tool to teach science, right? For example, based on the injuries that Admiral Nelson may have received in the Battle of whatever, how would you prioritize that treatment, and what would you prioritize? And I just wanted to mention that I think likewise, science can be a really great tool to teach and train artists, right? And in one of our fellowships with the CCBI, we're doing just that, working with graphic medicine techniques and the students who are utilizing their experience in graphics to articulate scientific information, but also most recently, in the news and in science breakthroughs, some of the images that we're receiving, of the far reaches of the universe from these new telescopic lenses 13 billion light years away. Some of that has really like blown my mind, and I've been just consuming TikToks like crazy about it, and it's really shifted my mindset as an artist too, of like what I think the message really is about our existence on this planet, and how we can all serve each other, and what our purpose of life is. So science and the creation of science and all different fields, I think really they all relate to one another in some way, shape, or form. And I think that just attributing the correct value is what we need to is what we're really talking about here, on attributing value to artists in the same way that historians, scientists, medical professionals are receiving value in our societies and economies.
Yeah, there's a reason for arts and science faculties, right, and universities.
Right.
And because they are extremely connected in terms of, again, big useless questions, right? Like Einstein was asking big useless questions about the distance, about whether gravity much more distant from the Earth was different, and that is extremely relevant in every cell phone, every time you use a cell phone and stuff. He didn't know it at the time, right? Because you're asking, and with Marshall McLuhan talking about the beacon, like we're just asking them to following our curiosity, trying to explain and understand the world, and then then society gives it a use, right? So it's like, if we can make that more transparent, that role and the importance that eventually has a massive importance economically, socially, technology, you know what I mean? But it starts with, like it doesn't start with, I've got a project plan, it starts with looking at that moon, I'm wondering.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, science is an art, right? Science, if you go back into history, you look at Michelangelo, he studied the human body, right? So he has given so much, but we know him as an artist, right? But he knew a lot about science. So I think they are intertwined, but when we tend to think about the arts, we tend to think about only paintings, installations, or little limited information that is not given. Again, I go back to building a culture, advocating, and the new generation of humanity needs to understand what the arts is. It's more than just drawing a picture.
Yeah,
right. It's all over. The arts are all over.
Yeah, I've been really lucky, like specifically in the games, in the game scene, to meet creative coders, people that are specifically in scripts that are creating beautiful art through, if statements and stuff like that. And I never thought at the start, because I never really interacted with any coders in that sense, but how related we were to kind of actually we were able to communicate with each other because of this relationship between our ability to be like, oh yeah, like we could do this, and their ability to reach out into the ether and pull out ideas and have all these kind of concepts, but they're doing it in a very, what seemed to be a very limited scope in script, but it definitely isn't. But yeah.
Thank you. I want to thank Colin for your comment and your question in the chat there. Unfortunately, we are out of time. So I want to just take this chance to thank the three of you, Mason, Karen, and Marisol, for joining us today at the Cultures Compass Conference in this wonderful conversation. I think we had a really great conversation with a little bit of debate in there as well, and it was really entertaining. So thank you all very much. And thank you to Jordana, our graphic note taker there, that you can also see being created as we've been talking. And I'd just like to let the audience know that right now at 1:20 we're going to be seeing a performance now from the artist performance that was delayed earlier by Kobina just before our lunch break. So thank you all again and have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you so much. Enjoy the performance. Can we see this roll of the artist drawing somewhere after? Or?
It'll be on the Cultures Compass website. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it looks beautiful.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a great
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.